Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are going to get started in just about 2 minutes, so sit tight. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first webinar of the 2025 Water Ambassador Webinar Lunch and Learn series. The Water Ambassador Program is a partnership program between Martin County and the University of Florida IFAS Extension. And we're glad that you're all able to join us today. So the webinars are on Tuesdays at noon. Generally, we're having them on the third Tuesday of every month. And you can see that we already have an exciting lineup for you. Vincent is going to put the registration links for each of our upcoming webinars in the chat, but we've got the next one coming up in February on planting Spartina alterniflora and living shorelines. Program from Martin County about their seagrass restoration efforts. One about oyster aquaculture. And then in May, we're going to have a presentation and panel talking about sort of Martin County land acquisition and watershed restoration projects. So we've got a lot of exciting webinars as well as panel conversations upcoming for this year. We will be recording this presentation as with all of our others, and so you can find it in the Martin County Extension YouTube page. Probably easiest to just Google Martin County YouTube or whatever web browser you use. And we do have all previous years in playlist form, so you can see this year's as we load them, as well as previous year's webinars. And just a reminder, we will be holding all questions to the end. Please use the chat function to enter your questions. And then once our presentation for today is done, we will then go through all the questions. And with that, I am really pleased to be able to introduce our presenter for today, Vicki Gambale. Ms. Gambale has been dedicated to implementing the Clean Vessel Act education program since 2011 through community engagement, collaboration, and technical support. She's equipped boaters with the tools and resources they need to prevent pollution. As a Clean Vessel Act Education Coordinator for Florida Sea Grant since 2021, Vicki is utilizing scientific research to develop a program that promotes behavior change to protect water quality. And this is the presentation that Vicki is going to be talking to us about today. Vicki holds an MS in Fisheries Science with a minor in Environmental Science from Louisiana State University, as well as a BS in Marine Biology from Roger Williams University. So with that, super excited to have Vicki here talking to you all about Clean Vessel Act Needs Assessment that she's conducted, how it impacts the Indian River Lagoon Treasure Coast region. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vicki.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, let me just share my screen here. Thank you, everyone, for joining today to hear about the Clean Vessel Act. My work, as well as this research that I'm presenting, are funded through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection from a grant through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So here's an outline of what I'll be talking about today. First, I'm going to give you a little brief background about the Clean Vessel Act, let you know what outreach tools we currently have available. And then I'm going to probably spend most of the time talking about the needs assessment that was recently concluded, touch on some future plans we have, and then touch on the no discharge zones, and then I'll be answering any questions. So let's get started. The Clean Vessel Act was established in 1992. It prohibits vessels from discharging untreated sewage into freshwater or coastal saltwater. It also established a federal grant program that is administered by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. In Florida, the CVA program is housed in the Department of Environmental Protection, and since 2021, DEP has contracted with Florida Sea Grant for CVA Education. So the grant program will pay for 75% of all eligible costs to construct, renovate, operate, and maintain things like pump outs, mobile pump out vessels, and porta potty dump stations. So this is a grant that marinas, yacht clubs, any boating facility can apply for. It is reimbursement based, so a signed contract must be in place before any work can begin. And then once that pump out or dump station is installed, it has to be open to the public and listed on the Pump Out Nav app. And the facility cannot charge more than $5 per pump out. So now that you know some background about the Clean Vessel Act, I'm going to move on to current outreach tools we have. The first one is a mobile phone app called Pump Out Nav. It maps out all publicly available pump out stations and it's color coded. So all the green pins indicate that pump out is operational. The red pins indicate that pump out is currently broken after hurricanes. That's a very helpful feature since a lot of them tend to get destroyed. And then the blue pins just let you know that we're not positive of the status, so we recommend you call in advance. If you click on any of the pins, you're directed to this page where you could see how much it costs to get a pump out, the hours that it's open, and the exact location within the marina. As a boater, you could report a problem if that pump out happens to be down or broken, and you could report that the unit works. Both of these things will update the pin color as well as this date and time stamp. So you could see the last time that status was updated. In addition to pump out stations, this app also includes dump stations, float-in restrooms, but we don't have them in Florida, so you could ignore that, and mobile pump out vessels. Martin County is lucky enough to have a very successful mobile pump out program called the Martin Ship Pump Out Operation Program. So it offers boaters throughout the entire county a convenient waste disposal option. If you're interested in sharing this app with anyone you know, we have flyers and stickers. If you want hard copies, let me know and I'd be happy to mail you some. We also have a social media toolkit with graphics sized appropriately for each platform, as well as some text for your post. That toolkit is available online and has everything you need to share information about the app to your followers. In addition to the Pump Out Nav app, we've developed educational videos. This one here is about marine sanitation devices, sewage management, and it specifically goes over sewage disposal and discharge laws, as well as Y valve and how to properly secure that. We have another video that shows you what we do as staff when we conduct a site visit of a facility that's listed in Pump Out Nav. We actually run a few checks of the equipment to make sure it works and performs adequately. So that's what this video is all about. And then we have a video that explains the difference between sewage discharge from a boat and bilge water discharge. It talks about the different sources of pollution that each of those can potentially have and what to look out for to be able to identify the difference. It was really developed for non-boaters to get to know a little bit more about what they're seeing when they're living maybe near a marina. We finally have this pilot project that we're calling a Learn-In Challenge. We attend outreach events, and while we're there in person with boaters, we ask them to take this questionnaire or quiz, if you will, and in exchange, they receive this toolkit. The toolkit has this adapter that boaters screw into their boat's deck waste fitting, and then the pump out latches on to that. Normally when pumping out, you have to hold the pump out into that deck waste fit-in to maintain a seal. So this allows you to have a hands-free pump out. The toolkit also includes educational materials, cable ties, so the boater can properly secure their Y valve or discharge valve in the closed position, which is the law if they are boating in an area where it is illegal to discharge. And it has dye tablets. These are to test a boat's marine sanitation device. So it's a little tablet, you put it in the boat's toilet, wait a few minutes, the water turns a really bright iridescent color, and like a green, and then the boater will flush and look around the boat to see if they see any dye in the water. If they do, they know their discharge valve is either open, so it's not properly closed and secured, or they have some other type of leak and issue that needs to be investigated further and repaired. This is the one of the publications that's in that toolkit that just tells them how to use the adapter, cable tie, all about the Pump Out Nav app, and then it goes over the different types of marine sanitation devices as well as the laws regarding discharge. DEP also has developed some great outreach tools. They include these pump out rack cards, these Officer Snook kids coloring and activity books, a pledge card for boaters to take a clean boating pledge. And then one of my favorite publications is this Clean Boater Habits booklet. This is more comprehensive. It includes not just issues like sewage, but also talks about oil, fuel, aquatic invasive species, hurricane preparedness, and things like that. All of these outreach materials are available. So if you're interested in any of them, please let me know, and either I can get them to you or I could work with DEP to get you theirs. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on to the needs assessment. So why do a needs assessment? Well, the primary reason was to ensure that the limited amount of funding we have is utilized where it's most needed. This needs assessment is broken down into two main sections. The first one focuses on education, and then the next one focuses on infrastructure. So for the education portion, we wanted to determine the boating community's knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors as it relates to boat sewage topics, and to collect some boat demographic data. We collected all this information through an online survey that was promoted on social media, through press coverage, and in person at events. After reviewing all the data for things like quality assurance, and removing things like duplicate responses, we had 808 survey participant responses that were used. The map here shows the home zip code from participants, and it's color-coded. So all the blue pins are full-time Florida residents, the yellow pins are part-time Florida residents, and the purple pins are visitors who boat in Florida. Now, I'm not going to go over all of the responses to every single question that was asked in the survey. If you want to see that, check out the full report. It has an appendix that lists every question and then has a easy either table or graphic to see the results, so it's not too much reading. But I am going to share a few key questions and the results with you now. So one of our objectives was to determine the boating community's knowledge of sewage disposal laws. So I asked participants, where is it legal to discharge untreated boat sewage? The green highlighted rows show the correct answers. 32% of participants correctly selected both the Atlantic and Gulf Coast option. As a follow-up, if they selected either of these responses, they were directed to fill in how many miles from shore they can legally discharge. of the 46% of people who chose the Atlantic coast option, most of them, 78%, correctly filled in 3 miles. However, of the 41% who chose the Gulf Coast option, only 23% of them filled in 9 miles. Most people incorrectly thought the Gulf Coast was also 3 miles. That's not too surprising. Everywhere in the US, state waters extend 3 miles except for the Gulf Coast of Florida and Texas. And this has to do with the history of when our state joined the Union in the 17th century and what they were able to legally defend as pre-existing boundaries. So another objective of the survey was to determine the boating community's attitudes about water quality impacts from sewage. So I provided 3 statements, and I asked participants to indicate the extent of their agreement or disagreement. So the first statement said, nutrients from sewage in the water can trigger harmful algal blooms that can kill plants and animals. Most boaters agreed with that. The next statement said that raw sewage discharged into the water from recreational boats is not significant enough to cause people to get sick. Most boaters disagreed with that. And then the final statement said, high concentrations of sewage in an area can seriously deplete dissolved oxygen in the water. And most boaters that took this survey agreed with that. Another thing I'll note, we also asked if they saw sewage being illegally discharged from a boat, would they report it? 70% of participants said yes. Only 5% said no, and 25% said I don't know. Based on all of these, I'd say most boaters are ecologically conscious as it relates to water quality and sewage, and that they care about the waters they recreate in. The final objective of the education portion of the needs assessment was to determine boaters' behavior as it relates to sewage disposal practices. So I asked participants, in the past year, how often did you discharge boat sewage into each of the 4 categories listed? Now, I'd like to note that this is considered self-reporting, and there have been multiple studies that show the response you get with self-reporting tends to be biased and may not reflect actual behavior. So please keep that in mind when looking at these results. 43 participants said that they always use a landside facility like a pump out. That's great. This is the ideal practice to keep waste out of the water. When we look at overboard discharge, regardless of the location, most boaters say they never discharge overboard. However, there are some that always do, even in waters where we know it's illegal to do so. I'll also note that a lot of survey participants indicated the need for more conveniently located and free sewage pump out stations and concerns regarding waste from moored and anchored vessels. Finally, I asked participants to rank sources of information they would use to find the location of a pump out. Staff at a marina or yacht club was ranked the highest. That's important for us to know when we're developing educational materials. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on to the infrastructure portion of the needs assessment. The objective for this was to determine if there are enough pump outs in Florida for the boating community, and if not, find out where more are needed. We also wanted to investigate the need for dump stations. But first, I'm going to focus on pump outs. So based on the survey we did, results showed that 87% of vessels 26 feet and greater have an installed toilet with a holding tank. and therefore might need a pump out. So how do we determine if there are enough pump outs for boaters in Florida? Well, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, remember they're the federal agency that distributes Clean Vessel Act funds. They recommend one pump out and dump station for every 300 to 600 boats. However, pump outs and dump stations serve two separate populations of the boating community. If you're familiar with boats, you can imagine a boater with an installed toilet and a holding tank. They cannot use a dump station. They need a pump out. So we developed a target ratio specifically for pump outs, and we based it on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife recommendation, existing pump out ratios for counties, and the boater survey. Based on all of that, our target ratio is one pump out for every 500 boats greater than or equal to 26 feet. This size class of like why 26 feet? It was primarily determined because there is Florida's statute which requires every vessel 26 feet or more that has an enclosed cabin to be equipped with a toilet. Now, instead of looking at the number of boats in Florida, which of course is highly variable based on a lot of different factors, we looked at infrastructure. Specifically, how many boat storage spots have direct access to the water. So this included all slips, moorings, and dry storage spots with on-site access to a launch or lift. A lot of these storage spots are at facilities like a marina or yacht club, but we also estimated the number of private docks behind things like single-family residents that have boats at them. And we did that based on satellite imagery. We quantified the number of storage spots based on those two size classes. And then we analyzed all the data at the county level. We also quantified the number of pump outs based on if they are available to the public or private just for that facility's customers or members. Then we used some pretty simple math to calculate a pump out ratio. We took the total number of storage spots greater than or equal to 26 feet within a county, and we subtracted all of those storage spots that have access to a private pump out. The result of that was the number of storage spots that potentially need a public pump out. Simply divided that by the number of public pump outs in the county to get the pump out ratio. If that ratio was greater than 500, I then just calculated the number of additional pump outs needed to meet the target ratio. These are the results. There are 487 pump outs in Florida. Of them, 185 are private. With that new ratio of one pump out for every 500 boats that are greater than or equal to 26 feet, and when we analyzed it at the county level, an additional 58 pump outs are needed. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on to dump stations. Based on survey results, 46% of vessels that are less than 26 feet have a porta potty or bucket for waste and therefore might need a dump station. Now, dump stations are not as common in Florida, so I'm going to take 2 minutes to show a video developed by Oregon Sea Grant about dump station maintenance so you can see what they are and how they work.
In this video, we will go over the different parts of a portable toilet washdown or dump station. Dump stations come in two categories: those that are connected to a pump-out station, which has the mechanics to pump waste, and gravity-fed models, which drain into a holding tank and have no utility connections. The focus of this video is a dump station connected to a pump-out system. A dump station's performance largely depends on how a pump-out station is maintained and operated. The dump station consists of a metal or fiberglass enclosure, a lid that attaches to the structure with hinges, and a rinse hose to spray down a portable toilet. If the dump station is connected to a pump out, you will find on and off buttons on the outside of the enclosure. When you open the lid, you'll find a basin in which to dump sewage. When the system is on, running water in the basin helps rinse waste down the drain, where it's pumped through the system. Depending on the station's location and how it's installed, the plumbing will connect to onshore sewer lines or storage tanks for disposal. Refer to the product manual for additional information. Watch the video for maintenance tasks, winterizing, and troubleshooting common issues before contacting your CVA coordinator.
Okay, thank you again to Oregon Sea Grant for that great video. So like I said, in Florida, dump stations are not as common. In fact, there are only 7 of them, and 1 is private. Anecdotally, when facilities with dump stations were asked about their units, they said they rarely, if ever, get used. I suspected that might be the case. So in the survey, we asked boaters that said they have a porta potty, a bucket, or a marine composting toilet where they currently dispose of waste and what they would prefer to use to dispose of waste. We do see an increase in preference of porta potty dump stations. Because it's not evident just by looking at these 2 pie charts, I wanted to let you know a few things we discovered. So when looking more closely, it looks like the number of people who currently use a public or marina toilet and the number who prefer to does not change a whole lot. This is because most of the people that indicated they currently discharge overboard, they said they would prefer a public or marina toilet. And a lot of the public or marina toilet people said they would prefer to use a dump station. So that's why you don't really see that in the pie chart, but I wanted to point that out. Also, a lot of the people that currently use their home toilet said they would prefer a porta potty dump station. I do think more research is needed, so ideally what we will be doing next is looking to see, pick maybe 2 or 3 of the existing dump stations, look at what their current usage is, and then conduct outreach about dump stations in those specific areas, specifically what they are, how to use them, and exactly where they are located. Then we can determine if there's any increase in usage before we go ahead and invest funding in installing more infrastructure of dump stations throughout the state. I think that research would be helpful. So let's talk about what else is next now that the needs assessment is complete. So one thing is that we need to start conducting more outreach about the availability of Clean Vessel Act grants. A lot of places know about them, but there's still a lot that don't, especially when you consider boating facility staff. Some of them have a high turnover. So we already have 2 resources to do this, Trifold, as well as a comprehensive Clean Vessel Act application packet that goes over all the details a facility might want to know when applying for this grant. If any of you are with a marina and want to apply, I strongly recommend you check out the application packet. When you first open it, it looks kind of long. It's over 30 pages. Most of that is an appendix that goes over details for every supporting material you have to submit with your application, like proof of insurance and design plans. It's really the first 9 pages that I would recommend you read fully. And of that, the first page is the cover page, and the second one is a table of contents. So it's really not too bad. It's just 7 pages to read, and then you have all the information you need to know about the grant, and then you could use those supporting documents to complete your application. We're also currently working on a hopefully 1-pager that will have information regarding pump out resiliency, suggestions on things to do, especially when installing a new pump out to help make it more resilient with special attention to severe weather. We also will be launching a campaign about the 9 nautical mile discharge limit on the Gulf Coast, since the needs assessment identified that as one of the things a lot of boaters are unaware of. And since we found out that marina managers are the primary source of information for boaters, we will later this year be launching a quarterly newsletter called Harbor Herald Sewage Solutions. And we have a link if anyone's interested in subscribing to that. I suspect the newsletter will talk a lot about the Clean Vessel Act program, give you any updates to that, let you know about different workshops or webinars we have coming up, some hurricane preparedness information, and any updates to the grant program. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on to no discharge zones. So before we talk about them specifically, I want to make sure everyone knows what the discharge laws are. If a boater is in state waters, they are not allowed to discharge untreated boat sewage. And state waters, again, extend 3 nautical miles from the Atlantic coast and 9 nautical miles on the Gulf Coast. If they have a U.S. Coast Guard approved type 1 or 2 marine sanitation device, they are allowed to discharge within state waters, with some exceptions. Exceptions include freshwater, lakes, reservoirs, and impoundments, rivers that are not accessible by other states, and no discharge zones. So that is the big difference. No discharge zone is an area where boaters cannot discharge their waste, even if it's treated through a U.S. Coast Guard approved type 1 or 2 marine sanitation device. And in Florida, we now have 4. Destin Harbor, the island of Key West, the state waters within the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, and the newest one is the Indian River Vero Beach to Fort Pierce Aquatic Preserve. So in 2021, legislation passed that expands the potential for all aquatic preserves to be designated as no discharge zones. And there are 42 of them in the state. They must be approved by the EPA before they get that no discharge zone status. And DEP is the entity that is working on those applications. The first one they submitted was this Indian River Vero Beach to Fort Pierce Aquatic Preserve. And as of October 1st, it was in the Federal Register that this area is now approved as a no discharge zone. So what does this mean a little bit more? How is it going to affect boaters? Well, since it's already illegal for boaters to discharge untreated waste, it really only affects the boaters with a treatment system. So this 1% as well as this 14%. Although this 14%, they have a holding tank, so they could still use their system as long as all the waste is directed to the holding tank. So it really doesn't affect boaters a whole lot, except it allows for local government entities to enact a regulation that requires vessel operators to show proof of pump out if they are anchored or moored for 10 consecutive days or more. So they're only allowed to enact this proof of pump out if they're in a no discharge zone or within marked boundaries of a permitted mooring field. So this is the one area that I think it might affect more boaters, because they'll have to make sure if they're anchored or moored for 10 or more consecutive days that they maintain that proof that they properly got pumped out. That is everything I have today, and now I'm more than happy to take any questions you may have. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing so I could open up the chat.
Great, thank you. I am going to launch our evaluation for all of our participants. And we do have a question for you in the chat. Valentina wants to know what the name of those tablets are that determine whether or not you have a leak from your...
Oh, yeah, so they're just called dye tablets. Several different companies sell them. We don't promote anyone. The ones we get are biodegradable and natural and not harmful. If you'd like a sample one, let me know. I could mail one to you with some of our resources.
Would you be willing to put your email in the chat for our
Yes.
participants? Fantastic. Any other questions for Vicki? Okay, well, we'll wait just a minute or two longer. I want to thank you all for joining us. Oh, we do have another one. Melissa asks, are local governments able to apply for the CVA grant program?
Yes, any entity really can apply for the Clean Vessel Act funds. Martin County gets a grant to run their pump out boat, but it could be county, city, private marinas. The only requirements is that once that facility is built or that pump out boat is operating, it has to be open to the public. They can only charge up to $5. And they have to be listed on the Pump Out Nav app. And then of course there's like grant reporting requirements, but it is open to local governments, cities, counties.
And between Palm Beach and Martin County, it looked like there were either 7 or 8, sort of a gap of 7 or 8 pump outs in this area. So there's a need that's for sure. Well, Vicki, I want to thank you so much for your willingness to present to the Water Ambassadors and for being our first presenter for 2025. For all of you, I want to thank you for joining us. We do have the links to the registration for our next, our upcoming one being February 18th. And Jim wants to know why only $5?
That is what the Clean Vessel Act rule on the federal level allows. So it is a federal requirement, but there is discussion. They have been talking about rewriting that rule to make some updates, because it's been a long time since that rule was written. So there is discussion about increasing that dollar amount that facilities are allowed to charge. I will say though, so Clean Vessel Act funds can also be used to maintain and operate a facility. If that facility does choose to charge this $5, they must keep records of that, right, as part of the grant requirement. And then if they get a grant to operate, they have to subtract all of the fees collected. So it is best, in my opinion, to just offer it for free. It kind of, I've been told it's compared to like the chicken at Costco, like they lose money on it maybe, but it brings a lot of people in the door to spend money on other things. So a marina might lose money on the pump out, but maybe make up for that in more sales of fuel or in their marine supply stores, their ship stores. So something to consider.
Great, thank you. We will hang on for another minute or so for those last questions that are rolling in. And in the meantime, thanks again, everyone. All right, thank you, Vicki.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks.